Well, it's my pleasure to introduce John Slymer, VE3 Echo Juliet. A lot of you may have worked him in contests and various other operating activities. He has a massive signal on the HF bands right down to 160. He's the president of Contest Club Ontario, and he's the perennial annual barbecue host at his place out a little bit east of Hamilton. And he's also perhaps the province's most accomplished and outstanding contester, an honor that maybe Yuri Victor Echo 3 Delta Zulu might kind of be a person you'd mention in the same sort of breath. But John's been, I think a lot of you have heard me talk about the World Radio Sport Team Championships. WRTC is the Olympics of Ham Radio, held every 4 years or so. And John's been to all but one of those. I don't think he competed at the very first one in Seattle, but has been at every one since. So started in '96 in San Francisco, and in Brazil in 2006, the team he was on with VE7 Zulu Oscar, they were first overall. So that's a huge accomplishment. There tend to be about 60 teams at these WRTCs. And the last one he was at was Germany in 2018. We're waiting till probably next year for the next one, so a 5-year gap in Italy. I've told some of you about the James Brooks Vimeo video about WRTC 2014 in New England. It's a really good video, about an hour long. You can see John operating in that video. So I recommend, if you haven't seen that, to look that up. He's also been on some DXpeditions, I think in the early 2000s, to South Sandwich, South Georgia, South Orkney, and those are just the South. So he's been to some other places too. John and I crossed paths as undergrads at University of Waterloo when we both had keys and some of the same terms to the VE3 University of Waterloo, UWO, radio station. He was VE3 Alpha Kilo George, and I was VE3 Alpha Oscar Delta. And since then, he's had a radio-oriented career in the broadcast industry with broadcast stations, working on transmitters and antennas, towers, planning all of the infrastructure at radio stations. He had me out to his dream contest station last August, which was wonderful. He's got 18 acres there with lots of towers, stacked Yagis, something really special on 160 that I think he'll be talking about. And tonight we're looking forward to hearing him talk about his station, his career in contesting, maybe some advice for newer contesters, and also Contest Club Ontario. And as Harry mentioned, we're going to be involved in the Ontario QSO party with a special call commemorating the 100th anniversary of the KW Club. So that'll be Victor Charlie 3 Charlie. And I guess just before I let you start, John, I'd like to acknowledge several guests who have just joined us. There's Larry Kilo 7 Sugar Victor. There's Jack, I saw him somewhere, he came up. Jack Schuster, there he is, waving. W1 Whiskey Echo Foxtrot. And I think I saw Danny K7 Sugar Sugar. come up. There he is waving. Excellent. Okay, and there may be more elite contester people who joined in to see your talk, John. And if so, welcome. So over to you.
All right, well, thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Vic. Is the video okay at this point, just to check? Okay. Yeah, okay, because I'm just, okay, excellent. Listen, thank you very much. I appreciate it very much, Vic, for your very kind words and generous introduction. And thank you, Harry, as the president of the club. And I want to start off by saying congratulations to the KWARC for on the 100th anniversary. The club that I'm going to speak about, Contest Club Ontario, is only 20 years old this year, so we're just in the baby stages compared to you guys. So when Vic and I first started talking, he suggested that the club would like to hear about Contest Club Ontario, which I will do in the second half of this presentation. But he also suggested that maybe I should start with a little bit about myself and a little bit about my station, which I will do, and hopefully I can make that part of the presentation without getting sort of too big a head over the whole thing. By the way, this is not my first KWARC meeting. I got to thinking about it, and I remember that in 1973, when I was at the University of Waterloo, Paul Henderson, VE3EJ, brought me out to a meeting, and I think it was described to me as being the EMO bunker. I hope I have that correct, but that's my memory of the first time I was there. And I was also at the KWARC meeting, I don't remember the month, but it was in 2005, after I'd come back from the expedition to Kerguelen, and at Gary Hammond's insistence or recommendation or whatever, I did a presentation on that the expedition at that time. So here it is, my third time. So hopefully things go okay. Let's see if we can get this done properly. Let's bear with me, please. Just make sure I get this right. All right, so, oops, I moved a little far ahead there. So a little bit about me and my station, and hopefully a little bit more about Contest Club Ontario, which I think was what people were predominantly interested in.
John, we're seeing your screen, not the single screen.
Right.
Seeing the presenter side.
How do I fix that?
So my suggestion is go to display settings and then go and click on duplicate slideshow.
How's that? Does that look okay? That full screen?
No, click on duplicate slideshow.
The next one down. There.
No.
There we go.
That looks full screen.
Is this okay?
Yep, that's good.
That looks full screen.
Yep, you got it.
Okay, so a little bit about me. My current call is VE3EJ. I was first licensed in 1972, so that I had my 50th anniversary back in February. Puts me at half the age of the KW club. My first call was VE3EJ in 1972. I held that call till 1979, and I operated out of Queenston, which is about halfway between Niagara Falls and Niagara on the Lake, along the Niagara River. In late 1979, the company that I was working for transferred me out to Alberta. So I dropped the VE3EJ and picked up VE6OU and held that call for 5 or 6 years until I came back to Ontario and got the call that I wasn't all that happy about, the VE3OZU, with the VE3EJ being gone. So I kind of chose to operate VE6OU Portable 3 for a period of about 5 years until I got to the top of the list for a 2-letter call, and VE3EJ came along in 1990, and I hold that, or have been holding that call since then. And my operating location has been Grassy, which is near Grimsby, for the entire period of time since 1990. So I've just listed a few of the contest calls and some de-expeditions and things like that where I've been. I mentioned the FT5XO a little earlier. I've operated from all the VP8s except for, well, let's put it this way. I've been to South Sandwich, South Georgia, South Orkney, and the Falklands. with the microlight expedition group. Had a lot of fun doing that, and tremendous experience. Operated contests from HC8N, A61AJ, VP2E, AP9EJ, and so on. You can read the calls, including K3LR and KC1XX in the US. Excuse me. As Vic mentioned, the Wrtc competitions, World Radio Sport Team Championships, I had the good fortune of participating in 7 of those. And the first one, the call sign that my partner V7ZO and I had was K6P. That was in San Francisco. And we then went to Slovenia, went to Finland, went to Brazil, where we had some good luck. Then we went to Moscow. And then I ended up with K9VV as a partner at his invitation, actually, in Boston, and finally in Germany as Y89U. And as Vic said, there's another one coming up in Bologna in Italy, and hopefully that's going to be in 2023. It was originally scheduled for 22, but as we all know, there's been a lot of complications in the world that have postponed that. Some of the other calls are operated from, I'd like to put V3UOW there. That's my connection to Vic, and to Waterloo, and so on and so forth. Moving on. All right, so where am I? Well, Grassy is a very small little place here, just a Grassy, and there, of course, is Kitchener. And I think as the crow flies, it's probably about 100 kilometers, maybe a little bit less from Kitchener, so not too far. You guys always have good signals out my way. All right, so this is the house that the property that I bought in 1985 when I moved back from Alberta. It's the original farmhouse on a 100-acre farm built in 1897. The property was subsequently subdivided, leaving this particular holding at 18 acres, and that's where I got now. There's a bunch of 10-acre parcels to the south of me that were part of the original piece of land. All right, well, here's a list. I've got 6 towers. I've got 21 Yagis at last count. And I won't go through them all in great detail here because I do have some pictures, and I'll sort of point them out on the pictures as they come up. But I do have antennas for all the HF bands, and then 6 meters and 2 meters as well. Also for the work bands are included there, as well as 60 meters. All right, this is, I don't know how well you can see it on your screen. It's a little bit on the small side, but these are the antennas looking toward the northeast from the road. There's one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, and there's one at the back that you probably can't see. So that's looking from toward the northeast. This is looking south. So we're north of the property here. Again, you can see the 5 towers and the 160 meter individually. And looking west at a nice, looks like my internet is unstable. Looking west at a nice sunset. And looking northwest, this is from the top of the 160 meter tower. I took this picture recently. I had to do a little bit of maintenance on the 160 antenna, and took the opportunity to take a picture that shows everything else that's on the property, looking from from the east toward the northwest. In addition to the Aggies and so on that I described, I have some receive antennas for low bands. I've got a DX Engineering 4-square, which is usable on bore short vertical elements. And the spacing between the elements is 98 feet. So it gives you an idea what size of square that is. It takes just about an acre of land. I got a high Z 8 circle for 160, and that's 8 short verticals. They're 24 feet tall, and it's on they're 200-foot diameter circle. So it's a fairly big antenna as well. This is the 8 circle antenna here for receiving only on 160. So if you count them up there, there's 8 verticals in a circle, a phasing box here, and ultimately a transmission line and control cables going back into the shack. That's about 700 or 800 feet away from the operating room. All right, the 160 vertical array. Now you can't see it well. You just have a nice sunrise here. This is looking from the house toward the east. Excuse me. What it is a full-size quarter wavelength on 160 meters, base insulated. And then there are catenary ropes or wires, if you will, that go directions, and suspended from those catenaries right about there's a little black dot that I can see on my screen. There's a vertical wire coming down. That's an eighth of a wavelength away from the main radiator. And it's got a T section on the top to resonate that thing as a director on 160 meters. So, 5% or so higher in frequency than the main vertical. And if you can sort of picture 4 of those, and we're using 2 of them at any one time for any given direction. So if this one here is a director, the one on the opposite side normally would be tuned as a director as well, but you bring it to ground through a small inductor to make it look like a reflector. So what you effectively have there is a 3-element vertical Yagi, with this being the driven element, that being a director, and that being a reflector over there. That antenna takes up about 4 acres of land, largely because of the number of radials that are underneath it. There's in excess of 60,000 feet of wire under this antenna. Excuse me. There's quantity 100, 200-foot long radials under the driven element, and then there's 100-foot long radials under each of the parasitics. So I think if you add that all up, it's about 60,000 feet of wire, and that takes, I think, as I said, 4 acres of land to accommodate that thing. And that's the band where I feel particularly comfortable and strong on. I really, really do enjoy 160 meters because of this antenna. So this is an 80-meter 4-square. Unlike the 160-meter antenna, these elements are all driven. They're all driven in the appropriate phase and appropriate magnitude to produce 4 different directions. Under this set of verticals, there's 29,000 feet of wire. So again, a lot of copper in the ground. All right, this one here I named Tower 1 because it was a 50-foot tower. Starting at the top, there's a 5-element 15-meter Yagi stacked over another 5-element 15 Yagi stacked over another one. So it's a 3-high stack of 15-meter antennas. And then there's a 5-element 20-meter beam here on a 56-foot boom at 150 feet. And the top antenna here is at about 160 feet. There's a few wire antennas, inverted V's and things hanging off it. So this is just a different view of it to give you a sense of what the thing looks like. So that's Tower 1. Tower 2, the second tower to go up. Excuse me. At the very top is a 5-element Yagi on 10 meters, which can be very, very effective at 160 feet, particularly when band conditions are poor. It's a great band opener and a great antenna for finding obscure paths on that band when the band is not fully supported with the appropriate number of sunspots. Below that, pièce de résistance here that I've always had good luck with. This is a full-size 3-element 40-meter beam. The boom length is 56 feet, and the elements are full-size, so they're in the range of 72 or 74 feet or whatever works out with the taper schedule to have half wavelength elements. And those 2 are rotatable. There's a prop pitch motor here to take care of that task. Below that, there's a 6-element 20-meter Yagi fixed south for working Caribbean or South American multipliers. A 7-element 15-meter Yagi for the same purpose, and an 8-element 10-meter Yagi down a little bit lower for picking off multipliers in the contest in a generally southeasterly direction. Okay, that's Tower 2. Tower 3, taken from Tower 2. This is a 100-foot tower. At the top is a 2-element 40-meter Cushcraft Yagi. Another identical 20-meter antenna as to what was on the first tower. That's a 56-foot boom, rotatable. Both of these here, prop pitch right there. This is a 5/5 stack on 10 meters, generally fixed on Europe, but I do rotate it a little bit when conditions warrant. And here's the second 20-meter Yagi that is stackable, I should say, with the first. In the background, you can see the 4-square for 160 meters. Tower number 4, the tower itself, it's 60 feet. This is an Optibeam, an OB16-3, I think it is. So that's a tri-bander, good on 20, 15, and 10. There's a 30-meter rotatable dipole here for working a bit of DX on that band, and a 6-element 6-meter Yagi, which hopefully will produce some joy this summer. We're all hoping we can get enough sunspots to get some really nice propagation. So we'll see what happens there. The 5th tower, 60 feet. This is a 4-element step IR. If you're not familiar with the step IR antennas, they're basically hollow fiberglass tubes to support the elements, 4 of them. And then they have a stepper motor at the center, at the boom location on each of the elements. And that stepper motor pays out a piece of copper tape, if you will, into the fiberglass elements, and makes it an antenna that you can optimize, at least in terms of the length of the elements, completely optimized at any given frequency between 20 and 6 meters. So that's kind of a fun antenna. I use that almost exclusively for the work band 17 and 12, but it is available for HF contesting bands as well. Above that, I got a, what do they call it, a 6M7, I think it is. That's a 6-meter antenna. It's up there at about 70 feet. Gives me a little direction diversity to the other Yagi, and that's quite useful in contests, so you don't have to continually rotate the beams all around. And I think it's 13 elements here on 2 meters, again, for doing a little bit of contesting and picking up a few multipliers on that band. Okay, just quickly here, what do I have in the station? I'll show you a photograph here in a moment. But fundamentally, I'm an Elecraft guy for radios. I've had K3 radios for probably about 10 years now. I've got 3 of them. Each have the band scope for looking at the band activity in many ways like a spectrum analyzer. I have 2 operating positions, and like I said, I'll show you that in a picture in a minute. One of them is for SO2R, so 2 of the radios are part of one operating position, and I can switch back and forth between the 2 radios, listen on one, transmit on the other, and you know, increase the rate that way and pick up band openings and multipliers and so on. And then the second position is just a single radio with a single amplifier. So in the SO2R position, I have a pair of Alpha 9500 amplifiers. They are automatic tune amplifiers. You don't have to touch anything. You just give it 1 dit worth of 20 meters, and the amplifier says, oh, I guess it's 20 meters you want, and it goes there from memory on pre-tuned settings, or you can have the thing actually optimized from scratch, where it will you know, compensate for a little bit of antenna VSWR or whatever. At the second location, I got an ACOM 2000, and it's also a no-tune amplifier, same deal. It automatically tracks the Elecraft based on a little bit of RF. On 6 meters, I got an 8606, which is an alpha amplifier. It runs full power on 6 meters. Now, the station is, excuse me, largely automatic, if you will. I bought some equipment made by Hamation, which essentially reads band data output out of the radios and uses that to automatically select the correct band or correct row, if you will, of antennas for a given band. That also feeds a 4x10 switch, so I can have 4 separate operating positions looking toward 10 band positions, if you will. So if you add them up, you know, 160 through 10, and then you add the work bands, you very quickly get to 10 and even exceed that. But any radio can have any antenna as long as it's not used by one of the other radios. So that's all sort of interlocked that way. To keep the interference to a minimum, I bought FilterMax bandpass filters, which kind of come with the Hamation package, same people. And I also have quarter wave shorted stubs on each of the bands, which are there to help with harmonic suppression. And the other advantage of having a short circuit stub is that you get some you know, lightning or near lightning protection by virtue of having a short circuit from a DC perspective in the line. And that's been quite effective. Haven't had any serious damage at all. In addition to that, I have some micro ham MK2Rs, which are what they call single operator 2 radio boxes. You can program those boxes so that they can do various things in terms of your receiving audio and directing your transmit CW signals or RTTY signals or voice or whatever. And on voice, it also has a built-in voice keyer so that when you're doing a contest, you're not constantly repeating yourself. You just press a key on your keyboard and it picks out the CQ, or you pick up the report or any other sort of pre-programmed voice messages you want in there. Very, very useful. And of late, I've been using N1MM as my logging software. I started out using CT, and then I graduated into using WinTest, and more recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, I've gone to N1MM because it's really quite versatile and covers virtually every contest that is there, unlike the others, which are a little bit more selective. Okay, there's the station. So this here is the SO2R position, so 2 radios. This is the microham box, which switches the audio and the keying and so on and so forth almost automatically. These are the P3s for the displays, so you can see what's going on the band. This is, when I say choosing antennas, it chooses a band, a row, if you will, and the rows are further divided down here. These switches, I can choose the particular antenna that I want on a given band. So there's 6 of those to match the 6 HF bands. Rotators here, the Alpha 9500 amplifiers, 2 of them there. The ACOM amplifiers here, going along with another K3 and another P3. And again, the band decoders and stuff. There's the MK2R, the voice here. And not that it's used in this case because there's only 1 radio, but if I had a second radio, it would direct the PDT and the various signals toward the correct radio in the correct sequence. I think, oh, there's the 6-meter amplifier down here. And I guess I better pick it up a little bit. I see we're running just close to the half hour, so I'll try and move this along. All right, Contest Club Ontario. So the slide deck here is an adaptation, an expansion, if you will, of the original Contest Club Ontario early beginnings talk that Bob Nash, VE3EJ, did at the last in-person CCO winter meeting that we had in February of 2020. So Bob did kind of a recap. The bulk of the presentation is his, and I want to give him full credit for that. I've just added some more stuff at the end and just changed a few little things here and there. There's the contest logo. Now, when you look at that, it never ceases to amaze me how big Ontario is. I mean, we're sitting here down this little corner over here, and I mean, just look at this place. I mean, it puts for American guests here, it puts Texas to shame if you check your square mileages. All right, so what happened at the beginning? Well, there were 2 people. Travis, VE3WO, who was living in Sudbury at the time, he and Bob Nash got to talking and thinking that, you know, we're looking at contest competitions, and there's more to this game than just individual competitors. There's also a very popular and a very interesting club competition that really, I think, is designed to promote activity. And they thought that a little more activity in Ontario might not be a bad thing to do. So sort of the early thoughts of forming a contest club in Ontario were there back in the spring of 2002 with these 2 gentlemen. Okay, so you know, early thoughts went to, well, why not have, you know, a Canada contest club rather than something more regional? And the problem with that is that most club sponsors in their club competition category have a defined circle, if you will, where the competitors must reside. And for most of them, I think for ARL, it's a 175-mile radius circle. And if you're going to have a club and enter as a club competition, all the participants need to be within that circle. So that really made the idea of a Canada-wide contest club a little bit, you know, not very practical, because we couldn't attract people outside of a 175-mile circle. So the idea of a contest club in Ontario was born and and launched. So there had been a number of contesters who were getting together in real coffee shops to talk about issues of common interest. A lot of people from the Golden Horseshoe area, from Kitchener, from time to time in Mississauga, and have breakfast and talk about contest issues and so on. And it was kind of through this group of guys that some of the early discussions took place, and thought about, well, why not have an Ontario club specific? The timing seemed right. There was a good number of people kind of involved in the contesting field, and Bob spearheaded a movement to kind of get things going. So there were a number of fairly active contesters already in that group. Myself, VE3EJ, that Vic had mentioned earlier, looking at past scores and saying, geez, look what we could have done if we'd have combined these scores under a club auspices. We could have done fairly well against some of the other big contest clubs in North America. So maybe we have the nucleus of what we need to compete on a serious basis. So they needed to have a plan on how to structure this thing. And the intent, it being 2002, was to get things going for the 2003 calendar year. So the inaugural CCO meeting to get things organized was held at my QTH, actually, because I got the space. And it was done in the summer of 2002, and various sort of topics with regard to organizing a club were discussed at that time. So what were the objectives for CCO at that time? Well, there were 7 of them. The first thing was to increase CCO membership, which probably wasn't too hard to do considering that it started kind of at the coffee club. So, there was a nucleus of guys to start with, but the objective was clearly to make that a bigger number, get more participation. I think, in the early days, you need to concentrate your energy on certain specific contests rather than spreading it out over a larger number. So, which contests were the ones that they wanted to attack first was on the agenda. The object, of course, is to produce competitive combined club scores. One of the vehicles, and this is point 4 here, that was developed, and it's not new to us, other clubs have done it before too, is to have an internal competition to encourage activity. So CCO came up with a program that we call, it's spelled SCCORE, or SCORE. And what that did was allocate sort of internal club points to participants from the club. The highest number of points obviously going to the highest score in the contest and working their way down. And when people achieve certain milestones with regard to a plaque, and subsequently for endorsements to the plaque, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, and I'll show you an example of the plaque as well. But there was a sort of let's get some internal encouragement to get people on the air. They had to choose a club executive. I had to develop a financial plan because there's going to be some expenses. And at the first meeting, also, open it up to the floor for any other suggestions and, for formatting issues and so on and so forth. So to an idea of where the numbers went, in 2002, I'm a little bit surprised by this number. 60 guys were interested at the very start, which is a pretty good number. In 1 year, that number increased to 145, and today it's in the range of 250, which is a pretty good club membership, with not everybody being active, but I would say that out of the 250, there's probably 75 guys that are active in many of the contests, and that's a pretty good testament, I think, to getting this club organization going. Number two, I guess they settled on quite a big number of contests, 34 of them right out of the gate. 11 were CW only, 10 were SSB, 9 were mixed, some were VHF, some were RTTY, but they all counted in the competition. Some of the contests occupied more than one weekend, so special consideration had to be given to those. And an example of that is the way we were counting the NAQP contest, for instance. NAQP has a running in the winter and there's another one in the summer. And if you're going to get points toward the score award, you took the combined points in the two NAQPs. So there's some organization and what have you to try and figure out how to make this whole thing work, both from a competitive standpoint against other contest clubs as well as internally for internal awards. Okay, in the first year, we there were some milestones achieved there. Number 3 in the Worked All Europe contest, number 1 in the California QSO party right out of the gate, or I guess that's 2004. In subsequent years, the Florida and California QSO parties have been very, very popular with CCO members. We've finished first in the club category many times. And you can read there, number 1's in the CQ Worldwide 160 and so on and so forth. Number 3 and 4 in the CQ Worldwide contest in the medium club category is really a pretty significant achievement, because the CQ Worldwide is arguably the biggest contest going, and there's an awful lot of competition and a lot of clubs. So to get number 4 was not too bad. We haven't got number 1 yet, but we're still working on it. Excuse me. Right, in the early days, we were looking at trying to compete with clubs like the Wrtc out of the Boston area, PVRC, the Frankfurt Radio Club. These are some of the big U.S. clubs. On the domestic front, in the QSO parties, the Tennessee Contest Group was one of our big competitors. They always put out a big showing, and in some cases we prevailed. In some cases we're still working on it. So we've got some goals here. Okay, create a scoring system for these plaques that I was referring to. The way, the certain contests were selected, I think it was the 31 or whatever mentioned on a previous slide, so a fair number of them. And the way the scoring works is that if you're the highest for the club, the highest score submitted, you got 1 million points, and you worked your way down on a percentage basis. If you had 500,000 points, for instance, then you got half as many, or 500,000 points toward your score plaque. And the basic plaque was awarded after 5 million points. And then there were endorsements in 5 and then later 10 and 15 million point groups. And they get longer and longer and longer, because you don't, the achievement gets to be a bigger accomplishment. So in the first year, 5 were awarded. You can see the calls there. These are some very active contesters, and they all achieved 5 million points in the first year. Within 6 years, there were 42 of them and 22 endorsements. So some of these guys got endorsements, and some of the in the 42 got endorsements, and so on and so forth. I'll show you them in a minute. Now, the score process was largely, but not completely automated. There are some very dedicated volunteers who comb through all the score claims, all the final scores, and compile all this stuff to see, who gets awarded what. It's a fairly big job of keeping spreadsheets and so on, but it's very aptly handled by Tony, V3RZ, V3JI, and V3KZ, and every year they come up with an accurate update for the awarding of these plaques. And that happened to be my plaque. I was number 3 in the first year. And as you can see, the basic award is for 5 million points. I think the first endorsement is 10, then you go to 20, then you go to 35, and so on and so forth, until you top out at 100. And then they give you a new plaque. So there's like an addendum to that. There's a second plaque, and I think the increments on the second plaque are I think they're in 50 million increments. So it's a long time between getting endorsements on the second plaque, but certainly something worth competing for. All right, a club executive was chosen for the first year. Bob, VE3EJ was the president. I was the vice president. Travis, the other founding member, and information and tech support, web support, and so on and so forth, was Don, VE3XD. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's in the Kitchener area as well today. Develop a financial plan. Well, the club has expenses. The plaques, the score plaques, are obviously not free, and CCO also sponsors a pretty good number of plaques for various competitive positions in the CQ Worldwide, WPX, and so on. So we needed money to fund that. The CCO meetings are not without cost. Well, I guess I'll get at it in a minute. We have 2 meetings a year, but we have to fund the activity there. And the CCO has also been donating to worthy causes such as the WRTCs and other significant activities. So where does the income come from? Well, I don't know how your club works, but we don't have membership fees. It's all done by personal donations. And we also have at the barbecue, which is every summer in August, a raffle. So we've been very fortunate to have prizes donated by various vendors, DX Engineering, the ARL with magazine subscriptions, Radio World. All these people have over the years, donated equipment and things, and people buy raffle tickets, and the raffle tickets go toward the finances of the club. And so far, it's worked well. And as I mentioned, we're up at 20 years now, so I think we're doing okay. Other items that came up, VE3MA, Alex took on the job of developing the graphics, the contest club logo. He also took on a QSL card design, and I'm not sure if it's done today, but in the early days, anybody could order so-called CCO QSL cards with your call, your information, but on a CCO sort of background with the logo and all, and that was very, very popular. Peter, VE3SUN. I think he's in California now, but at the time he took on to do all the calculations and tabulations for the SCCO-RE award, and developing what he called here geographical limit circles. As I mentioned before, each sponsor has a slightly different definition of who qualifies for club competition. The ARL, I'm pretty sure, was 175 miles. Other contests were a little different. And we also tried to move the circle a little bit to kind of, actually, I think I have a slide of the circle. Yes, look at that. Different contests, we use different circles. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as you stick to it for the given contest. Sometimes, there are stronger participants in the Ottawa area. Sometimes there are stronger participants, perhaps in the VHF contest versus HF contesting in the Windsor area. So you move the center of the circle around a little bit to suit the requirements of the particular contest. I should point out too that if you're going to compete, particularly for the ARL contest as a club, this club secretary needs to identify the location of all the participants. So the club secretary very diligently has to collect your 6-letter grid square, which will determine whether you fit inside of a predefined circle or not. And ARL goes through all those calculations and says, yes, these guys count, these guys don't. It's a little bit unfortunate that we have some guys that, that we have some members in Northern Ontario, thinking Thunder Bay and so on, and they don't fit in the circles at all. So unfortunately, for many of the competitions, their scores don't count, but they do count for the internal. While we're here is, I think this is the front page on the CCO website. And if you look down the left-hand side here, you can see many of the links that are there, including the Ontario QSO party. So anything to do with the Ontario QSO party in terms of rules and definitions and so on and so forth, you can find it there. There's a lot of other very good links on that page, and I invite you to go and have a look. And this is the sort of the closeout of the 2002 meeting, we took a break and lit a bonfire on the front lawn there. And there might have been a beverage or two consumed. And I think if I do a head count there, there's about 20 or 22 people present, which was a pretty nice showing for the first meeting. All right, so now some updates and additional pieces of information which weren't covered in Bob's original presentation. CCO recently acquired VE3 CCO in addition to VA3 CCO, which we've had since day one. So those are both CCO club signs, call signs now. The website, as I pointed to earlier, is at va3cco.com, and there are many, many good links there. So take a look there. There's some great links toward beginner as well as intermediate and what have you presentations on contesting. So take a look at that. The CCO runs a reflector, which is for CCO members, where we discuss various topics, make various announcements, publish high claim scores and so on and so forth. A good place for members to get information and stay current. So we have two annual meetings. The summer barbecue, which is other than one exception that I can think of, has always been on the Saturday of the last full weekend of August. I expect that hopefully will be that same time this year, and I would welcome any contest interested parties to come and join us, get to know some of the people. The summer one is a formal meeting, so we conduct all our formal business, elect our executives and so on and so forth. We also do our award presentations, various plaques and awards and things are handed out in person there. As I mentioned before, we have the door prizes as a result of very generous vendors that have over the years given us prizes. And it's generally a catered event, so we bring in a caterer and it's a barbecue, and what can I say? Generally, a good time is had by all at that event. There's also a winter luncheon, which typically has been held in Oakville, other than during the COVID years here, and it's usually the Saturday of the first weekend of February, where there is, roughly speaking, no contests. Some might argue that it's an RTY event, but that was the best weekend we could find in that general time frame. And this one, generally we have various guests make presentations on various contests and technical topics related to contesting. Has worked out very, very well for us. There's been some very interesting talks there, and it's a catered lunch as well, so it's a nice meal in a comfortable setting. And just by way of an update, the current executive, we now have 6 on the executive: president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, director of communications, and we keep the past president is on the executive for continuity, which has worked out well for us. All right, the OQP was mentioned. The OQP is the third full weekend of April, and that contest is administered by Tom V3CX and Stan V3TW. They do all the the publicity. They do the adjudication of the logs. They decide on the years now. I've done an excellent job on it. So, if you're interested in joining CCO, it isn't very difficult and it is free. If you go to our membership roster page on the CCO website, down on the left-hand side, that'll direct you to a short membership request form, which will look at your name, your call, look for your grid square, and send her in. And I'm not sure we ever rejected anybody. So if you're interested in contesting, by all means, feel free to join our group. And by the way, it's not, I hope it's not a conflict. The objective here is not to take anybody away from any competitions that KWARC is doing. Hopefully it is something that would be in addition to what you folks are doing. So that's the intent anyway. Like I said, it's free. But we do ask that you become active or be active in contesting. All right, 2019, this was the last Saturday in August, and this was the last year we had an in-person summer meeting because of COVID. And this is a picture of the membership that was in attendance, including my dog. And I think there were about 75 in attendance at that time. We've had, I believe, as many, not sure exactly what drives slightly higher attendance, but that's the kind of numbers we're drawing. And it's a very, very entertaining and informative gathering in the third weekend in August. So I just want to point out that CCO, or in fact, contesting in general, is not just for big guns. Contesting is for anybody who wants to make contacts during the contest weekends or whatever within that contest. I had a guy said to me, this was last week, he said, oh, I think there must have been a contest on last weekend, and he was referring to the WPX SSB contest. And he said, yeah, guys are handing out numbers, and I took it that it must be a contest. And I said, yeah, it was. I said, it was one of the big ones. It was a WPX contest. I said, how many guys did you work? And he said, well, no, I didn't work any guys. He says, I didn't know what number to give out. And he said, I didn't want to embarrass myself by giving out a low number. So let me tell you something about that. If you don't know what the exchange is, you can go to any number of contest calendar or contest rule sites, and you can find out, or you can just ask somebody who's got a strong signal, say, hey, look, I'm not in the contest. What do you need? And the guy will tell you. He'll tell you, I need your zone. I need your province. I need your, serial number or whatever. But the other thing that I want to point out, and this is what really sort of caught me, was that he mentioned it's like on the other end. I said, I was in the WPX contest, and when somebody calls me and gives me number 1 or number 2, I take that as a real honor. Number 1, why did he pick me? Maybe it's because the signal was strong, but whatever, he chose me. That's great. The other thing is, when he gives me number 1, I've got points in my log that nobody else has yet. He hasn't called anybody else or given any points. So don't be the least bit shy about getting into a contest, finding out what the exchange is, and then just, make 10 contacts, make 20. It doesn't matter. Contesting is not just for big guns, and neither is CCO. And the key that I wanted to sort of say, the whole purpose for the club is to encourage activity, be active. And there you have it. That's the logo again. Thanks for listening to me. And again, I want to thank Bob. He was the heart of the first 2/3 of the CCO presentation. That's it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, John. That's wonderful. And I wonder if people have any questions. Nick's kind of turned all our videos off to save a little bandwidth, but maybe people have questions, could just speak up.
I was asking, in contests with serial numbers, did they have to start at 1, or could you arbitrarily start at like 327 or something?
I think the intent is you start with 1, but I don't think there's anything wrong with starting with 327. But I think most people start with 1 and go sequentially.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Hey, John, not a question, but just a comment. Larry, K7SV, I am thoroughly impressed with the amount of activity coming out of Ontario. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and I hope a lot of that is due to the presence of the club. I mean, there's quite a bit of encouragement, and as I mentioned, there's the internal awards, and I think those go a long way. I think a lot of the U.S. clubs do the same thing as well. It's good for activity. And we'll see you tomorrow in the CWT.
Hey, John, this is Mike, W9RE. What are you using for common mode chokes on your Yagis?
It depends on the Yagi and on the vintage. The early Yagis that I built were KHCC designs. They have T-matches, and with the T-match, I have a 4-to-1 coaxial ballon, and that's the extent of it on those. On the later ones, I have bead ballons on most of them, and some of them are just sort of hand wound multiple turns of RG213 or whatever. It depends on the vintage here, Mike.
Okay. Thanks.
I'm sorry, Mike, that I didn't welcome you earlier. This is Vic. I just noticed that you were here as John got speaking, and also Stu N7ZZ is here joining us as well. So another guest.
On Jack, W1WEF. I don't feel so bad now when you beat me out in a pile-up or in a contest. I was wondering where you're going to put any more plaques.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you can probably see them behind me there, right?
Yeah.
I think I beat you in a pile-up once, Jack.
It was probably to someone in my town.
Okay, I was kind of wondering if any of our KWARC relatively new contesters had questions about things like when to run and when to S&P. What sort of rates are achievable with S&P? Would you care to talk about that a little bit, John, or any of the rest of you? There's quite a number of, there's a lot of contest expertise here right now.
If I can start, then maybe, I think you have kind of a feeling in most contests what your station should be able to do in a given circumstance, depending on where you are in the contest, time-wise, at the beginning versus later on when you've worked a lot of guys. You also generally have a feeling as to how good your signal is in on a particular band in a particular area. And I think if you kind of have a mental figure in your head as to what you should be able to do in run, and if that's not working as well as you think it should because of conditions or activity levels or whatever, then I think you often make a decision that maybe I should do some search and pounce. But it's a complicated question because when you're doing SO2R, which is single operator 2 radio, in a sense you're doing search and pounce and running at the same time, so that changes the equation too. It really is a function of the size of your station in terms of your ability to attract people. It's a complicated question. I don't think you can just sort of say, gee, you should run until the number goes down below 100, and then you should search and pounce. There's an awful lot of variables there, and I think you kind of develop a feel for it, if you will, as you go through the contest, as it changes. And just one more point too. I mean, and it gets modified a little bit. If you're running assisted category, a lot of the well, in theory, all the multipliers and the unworked stations are all visible to you on a screen, and you can often just shoot a point and shoot, which changes it too from having to actually listen to every single call. And don't get me wrong here, you got to verify the calls regardless, but it certainly gives you a strong clue as to who's there, as opposed to single operator unassisted, where you need to very carefully listen and make sure you get all those calls while running on the other radio. So it's very variable, Vic.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
Just a point of curiosity, John. This is Stu M7ZZ. Does the Contest Club of Ontario, when they're giving out their awards and that, make any distinction between the assisted modes and the unassisted?
No, they don't actually. And I think, well, I'm not sure if I've ever voiced that opinion, but I don't think that, no, they've always awarded strictly based on points. So, single op unassisted, which arguably is much more challenging. If you get the same score as a guy who did single op assisted, I think it's a much bigger achievement, and I think should be rewarded higher. But CCO does not. That's something I think we should look at.
Thanks.
Do you have any
just for
favorite
what it's
modes?
worth.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that, if we do a multi of some sort, the formula is very simple. If there's 4 participants in the multi and you make 10 million points, each individual gets, the equivalent of 2.5 million points in competing against the single ops and so on. It's not a perfect system, but the objective is still to encourage activity, and it's done that, and it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, what's a million here or there among friends,
There you go.
Nick, did you have something?
I was going to ask, do you have any favorite modes, or do you work them all?
Well, beyond a shadow of a doubt, CW is my favorite mode. I outside of contests, I probably do 95% of what I do is CW. I do like the big sideband contests, SSB contests, so I do participate in those, but CW for sure, sideband next, and after that, it's you got to go a long way to to keep me interested. I don't do a lot of RTTY. I've done some FT8, but CW is definitely my mode of preference.
Patrick, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just got a question about assisted versus unassisted. It's being new to contesting. I'm wondering, is it just if you're using spotting that it's assisted, or does that, if you're using a waterfall, does that become assisted? What is the hurdle line where assisting is assisted and when you're not assisted? If you're running blind, I can understand not assisted.
Yeah, I think, and there's probably some people here who can correct me. Anything that leads to call identification, other than you listening to it and identifying it yourself, is assisted. So I believe some of the waterfalls can associate calls with them. That would be assisted. If you have a waterfall with just signals, no signal ID, that's not assisted. Any kind of a packet generated spot that identifies the call, that is assisted. If you have 2 meters and some guy is feeding you calls, over a VHF, that's assisted. If your grandmother is there helping you call, identify calls, that's assisted. Basically, the call identification has to be you for single up unassisted.
Okay, so if you're not using Telenet and there's nothing on your waterfall other than the waterfall itself, that's a non-assisted.
I believe that's correct.
Okay. Okay.
You're presumably allowed to listen in one ear while working in listen in your left ear while working in your right ear or something to queue up the next one, though.
Sorry, I missed the question on that. I'm sorry.
I assume you are still allowed, as pretty much some of the single operator to radio stuff you've been talking about. I assume you are allowed to be receiving in one ear while working in the other ear.
Absolutely. I mean, you, as long as you, as a single individual, without other individuals one way or another helping you, if you do it, one radio, one ear, one in the other, that is not assisted.
One thing I might add to that, I think I remember seeing in some rules, and I don't remember whether it was ARRL or CQ, that if you use a code reader, that put you into the assisted category.
Yeah. Call identification other than your own ears, right?
John, I was also wondering, that fantastic antenna farm you've got, pretty much an antenna orchard. Does it do anything useful when you're not working on it? Do you have anything like any of the beacons running or anything?
Nope. When I'm not in the shack, there is no RF coming out of here.
Okay.
No. At one time, I had a packet link. I used to, in the early days, link on 2 meters across Lake Erie to K3 TUP. And, we used to get packet feeds that way, but that's many, many years ago, pre significant internet days.
Any other questions?
I've got a question. John, have you got an XYL in your life, and how do you get the go to put up another tower?
Well, yes is the answer, and she is incredibly understanding. Hazel's her name. She has a pretty strong interest in this hobby. She's attended all the WRTCs with me that I've been to. I can't say it's always easy. I mean, you got to choose the location for the tower, like preferably not above the swimming pool and so on and so forth. But she's pretty darn good. Very lucky.
Congrats. I know it goes both ways, so way to go.
Thanks.
I guess while we're talking about WRTC, I should also mention that Mike, W9RE, who's here, has qualified to go to Bologna to the next WRTC. And while we're talking about contests and the sideband WPX, which just happened, one of our members, a relatively new contester, new ham in 2018, Dan, Victor Alpha 3, India Delta Delta, who we call DXer Dan. I want to mention this while all our guests are here, got 868 Qs in the WPX for a score of 1.3 million plus points.
Good job, Dan.
Congratulations.
I have a question for John. John, do you spend a fair amount of time on maintenance, or are you lucky that you don't have to do that too much?
Well, that's a very variable sort of an answer. Some years are obviously worse than others. The biggest exposure is obviously with the antennas and the towers, and freezing rain and high winds are the problems. This year we had very, very minimal freezing rain, and I did no maintenance with regard to that. Back in 1990, I think it was, I mean, I got completely wiped out. Every single antenna was damaged with ice. I learned a lot. I think I learned a lot about antenna design from a mechanical standpoint, and rebuilt, and have been fairly lucky. But I'll tell you something, this year, the problem with maintenance has been rodents. All of a sudden one day my...
you want to walk home? Oh, okay.
Oh, are we okay?
You're allowed to walk home.
Okay. Yeah, rodents were the problem this year. All of a sudden, my 20-meter antenna, my rotator wasn't working. Rodents had gnawed through the multi-conductor cable. I had to find that on a very cold day. 2 weeks later.
Anyways, ready to head home? Just a meeting.
Sorry, somebody's got their audio turned on while they're on the repeater or something.
Yeah, so 2 weeks later, a piece of coax going to the 160 vertical got chewed off by rodents, and there was another one. And so this year was a rodent year, not an ice or wind thing. But overall, I feel I've been very lucky. But not to let my head get too big about the whole thing, but I think a lot of it, is the effort you put in at the beginning to make sure that things are designed to suit what weather might be coming. And I think I did that reasonably well, but there's obviously a limit. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Well, kind of curious as well, with some of your antennas and antenna systems and towers being hundreds of feet away from the shack. And what kind of feed lines do you run? Are you running any hard lines like 7/8, or is it just RG213?
No, I've been lucky, as Vic mentioned earlier. I've been involved with the communications, particularly the broadcast industry, and pretty much all the towers, the masts and a lot of the material, including the coax, has all sort of come my way. I used to say that if I'm not in a hurry, most of that stuff will come eventually within the industry. I'm in a hurry, that's a different story. The guys I work with, they take equipment off towers regularly. The habit is to take coaxial cable and what have you to a metal recycler and get scrap value for it. Or if I am aware of it, and a case of beer will get you a lot. But to answer your question, all the feed lines, well, except for maybe some dipoles and things like that, but I've got 7/8, what people are calling hard line. Heliax actually is is an Andrew or a CommScope trade name, but
Yeah,
it's like Kleenex. But anyway, yes, it's 7/8 Heliax predominantly, almost exclusively. I've been very lucky over the years to get lots of that, complete with connectors and all.
yeah. I have the same situation. All my feed lines going up the tower is all 7/8 inch heliax, even for HF now. It's only about 80 feet that I use, but if you have it, you might as well use it.
Absolutely. Yep. No, again, I've been very lucky that way.
Are there any other
Hey, John?
final questions for John before we want to move on with the club meeting? Go
Yeah.
ahead, Stu.
I got one for John because he talked about all those radials underneath both the 160 and that. Did you have a mechanical system? I mean, I put down 60 radials and I wear my body out, and you put down hundreds.
Yeah, well, I don't want to take too much time here, but it's kind of an interesting story about that. Not only did I put down 60,000 feet of wire underneath that 160 meter antenna, I actually did it twice. And I don't know if you're coming to Dayton, but I'm going to be giving a talk at the 160 meter dinner, and I'll mention it there. But the first time I did it, I thought I'll be smart. My brother-in-law is a welder, and he had access to aluminum welding wire. And I got 60,000 feet of that and laid it all out. And within one season through, I'm not sure it was electrolysis or just plain corrosion, the aluminum disappeared. And I did it all over again with copper. But to answer your question, I set up a reel stand and basically I just pull it off. I mean, it's an awful lot of walking. And then when you get all the wire out, then you get to spend the rest of the day or week on your knees and solder everything. It's not fun.
So how many countries have you got on 160, John?
307. The latest one to come in was the 8Q7 NW or MW or whatever. I worked that one this year. It's 307.
Excellent.
Hey, John, this is Joe, VA3BCV. Just briefly, it's a silly question, but a favorite piece of kit or maybe a particular accomplishment, like something, in particular comes to mind, just off chance. Great talk. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think in terms of accomplishments, I mean, it was just the privilege of first of all being asked and able to participate in some of those expeditions down into the sub and Antarctic regions. That is just something that you got to be there to to feel it. It really is something. It's not just ham radio. It's the fellowship, the guys that you're going down there with is one of the things, but the scenery and the just the thought of how far you are away from the rest of the people and so on. Definitely that's the highlight of the ham radio for me, is those expeditions.
Thank you so
much. RTC is not too bad either.
John, I'm on behalf of the Kitchener-Waterloo Amateur Radio Club and the number of extra guests who I'm also pleased were able to join us. Thank you to all of you for coming. But John, thank you for your presentation. It's been, I thought you'd be setting a bar so high that, I can't get there, but you've inspired, as opposed to, although I've been a ham a while, a relatively new contester as well, and to achieve. And so I want to thank you for coming and sharing your story, sharing about the Contest Club Ontario. I do want to encourage our KWARC members to consider, as you said, it doesn't cost anything, but particularly those who are involved in contesting in any way, to join, because there are benefits that you only began to touch on. So thank you so much for coming on behalf of all of us. We really appreciate your presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John, and thank you very much, all our guests.
Thanks, John.
Of course, you're welcome to stay for our actual local club business stuff, depending on how much time you've got. And
it'll actually
seeing all of you.
It'll actually include some contesting reports anyways. but I think, Jonathan, if you haven't done already, we can probably turn